Three, two, one, and there we go. Right. Hello, everyone. We are back with another video. This is another collaboration, and I am here with Kaspar. Um, and I'll just say a bit about Kaspar first, because he and I are more or less opposites here in Denmark, which is why it's so great to have him as a friend. Kaspar is not a competitive player, and he focuses on all the fun and historical bits, and he has a love for some things that maybe I lack, which is why it's so great to have you on the channel, Kaspar. Talking about stuff that is thematic and why you sort of love stuff that maybe isn't competitive at all, because that is also part of the game. So. Today we're going to talk about minor nations in bold action. And you are maybe my main go-to person about minor nations, because Kaspar owns and has owned and plays a lot of nations that nobody competitively plays a lot. And you still feel like sometimes, well, you want to win. So we have talked about a lot. You've taught me a lot about how to not win, and I am trying to teach you how to win sometimes as well. So that's our whole game, me and Kaspar here. So welcome, Kaspar. Could you just tell me a little bit about what drew you to play bold action in the first place?
Like many other people, I've always sort of been very interested in the history of World War II.
Yeah.
And I'd been looking at different games and seen some battle reports on YouTube on
Yeah.
bold action, and I thought the mechanics look very good, and
Yeah.
I thought maybe this was a game worth trying.
Yeah.
But again, I thought, whoa, I have no idea about what tanks were used, which
Yeah.
tank is a good one to use. And then I had a friend who said, why don't we try this game? He had a
Yeah.
Finnish army,
Yeah.
and it's not Jesper,
Yeah.
it's another guy.
Oh,
Um,
there are more Finnish players in
oh
Denmark?
yeah, but he's sort of dropped bold
Yeah.
action after a
Okay.
tournament. But well, I tried the game, and I just bought Germans like
Yeah.
every other person who starts. So
Everyone who started
yeah,
is Germans.
I was a bit different though.
Yeah.
I started with Blitzkrieg Germans and not
Okay.
late war Germans or anything. But I had one game, and then
Yeah.
he said, "Oh, I'm going to this tournament
Yeah.
in on Funen in about a month's time.
Yeah.
You should come."
Yeah.
And I thought, bloody hell, I've never ever been to a tournament before.
In any other
Uh,
game.
in any other game.
Yeah.
So I had that one game, and
Yeah.
then I needed to paint an army. Uh, so I painted
Well,
up
you
an
do
army.
that rather well and quickly.
Yeah,
Kaspar, for those who doesn't know, he is a commission painter and he paints enormously quickly. It's mental. You can basically pump out an army at the time it takes me to like paint 5 figures, then you've an army done. It's insane. So I guess you made that tournament with a fully
I
painted
did.
army, right? Yeah.
I did, and sort of my first game there was against Anders Gerfeldt, and
One of my WTC players, by the way.
yeah, and
Very competitive.
he looked very shocked when I said to him, "This is my second game. I have no idea about the rules. So you need to guide me and let me know if I do something wrong because it's
Yeah.
not intentional." And
Yeah.
he was very cool about it. And of course he won. And I had a great time
Yeah.
playing. Second game was good as well. Third game not as good because
Okay.
I was tired at that point.
Yeah.
But even at that tournament, I brought 2 tables,
Yeah.
uh, and I won
Yes.
best table. So, but I was
Your
hooked.
your
And
tables are always beautiful. Not always the best to play on. A
no,
lot of competitive players can complain about that, but they're always immensely beautiful. They're so like immersive. So yeah.
it's really part of the experience for me.
Yeah.
I hate playing on tables that look like
Yeah.
crap
Yeah.
and where you
So
can
you're
see.
not a 40K player as such.
No,
No.
I have never tried 40k.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
as far as I can see, I've not missed out on anything either.
No, no, I don't think you have. I
Uh,
think that would be a wrong match for you.
yeah.
So, in your eyes, what makes a minor nation for bold action then?
If we take it as Warlord Games has
Yeah,
defined it, it's an army that you can find in either Italy and the Axis
yeah,
and the France and Allies book. There are a few minor nations scattered around other books, but
yeah, and
in
then a few
general,
unofficial ones as well.
yeah, yeah, you have Denmark, which
Yeah,
is in Germany Strikes, I think.
yes, yeah,
You have China,
yeah.
which is basically
In
three different
Empire
armies.
and Flames.
Empire and Flames, yeah.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
but you have, I think, around 12 to 15
yeah.
different nations, and
Most of
most,
them smaller nations that were attacked by the
yeah,
Axis at one
that,
point.
yeah, I would say there are three big ones,
Yeah,
and then there are the rest.
yeah,
Then there are really small minor nations, if that
yeah,
makes any sense.
yeah.
But the big ones are Italy and France, and maybe China,
Mm,
because there's a lot of options there, and you
yeah.
you get you get your free squad, which is a good thing, um, and you can pretty much interchange a lot of different models, whether you play as a communist, as a
Mm.
warlord, or as uh, Chinese national, I think it's
So
called.
you would sort of maybe group these three in a special group where they're still like group with the minor nations,
There's a lot
but
of,
there are special cases.
yeah, there's a lot of options there,
Yeah,
and
there is.
some of the other nations have, through the campaign books,
Mm.
gotten quite a few other unit choices that are very good.
Yeah,
Hungary and Romania,
yeah,
um, which I've also played.
yeah.
I think I've played all minor nations in the Access book except the Finns.
Except the Finns.
Yeah,
Well, again, Finland is maybe a special case because they are not what I would say. I mean, they're competitive, right? They
yeah,
are a pretty good army, and not something that I would normally attribute to what you would find that interesting. Although the Winter War is very very immersive.
yeah.
Really, it's the David and Goliath thing, right?
It is,
Yeah,
and you could say a minor nation is also primarily a nation that fought in the early stages of the war,
yeah,
uh, with the exception being China.
yeah,
And of course, if you play the French as part of sort of an American force, where they
yeah.
used American equipment,
Yeah.
and I have no idea whether you use American rules for those, but they're
I think
primarily early
I
war.
think you actually do.
Yeah,
You use the American rules, or maybe even not the British ones. There is like a separate Vichy French. You can build that out
yeah,
sort of into the later stages of the war, but it's still not very late war. It's mostly early war. I
it is.
completely
Yeah,
yeah,
it's basically all the nations that were invaded by Germany
yeah,
and all the nations that joined Germany in attacking Soviet Russia,
yeah.
roughly
So
speaking.
roughly speaking, yeah, that's it. Although some of the minor nations that did join, Denmark included, invading the Soviet Union are not really represented in any way,
Yeah,
a meaningful way, right? And
yeah,
the Danish contribution was very, very small and limited to some SS units. So, so for me, one of the things that I immediately think about when I think about minor nations in bold action is that they're sort of they're very limited in and for me that's just how I define them.
mm,
That a minor nation is a nation that's very limited in their roster, it's very limited in what it can take, and maybe also limited in the selections in how you can sort of build the force.
yeah.
Does that make sense for you as well?
It does, and what a lot of people say is that, oh, why do you play a minor nation?
Mm,
Because what do you do when you uh, when your opponent has a late war
Yeah.
army. And
Mm.
again, it's like, yeah, you have a bit
You're
of a
gonna
challenge there,
struggle. You're gonna
and
struggle. Yeah.
and you have a struggle on your hand.
Yeah.
But there are ways. But
Yeah.
of course, you don't have Panzerfaust most of the time.
Yeah.
You don't. Your anti-tank weapon is usually an anti-tank rifle,
Yeah.
and while it
Which
can be
just
good,
doesn't cut it against 8+, 9+
no.
armor. Yeah. Yeah.
But again, there are nations
Mm.
which can do this.
Yeah.
Again, Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Bulgaria it doesn't have that many options, but it still has access to a Panzerfaust, and
Mm.
for some larger German tanks and armored cars, and I believe
Yeah.
you can take a Panzerschreck as well.
You can.
But in general, you are limited in your choices, and since they are early war,
Yeah.
many of the anti-tank weapons are not that good.
Yeah. That is the main limitation. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll get to the pros and cons of the minor nations in a bit.
Yeah.
Before we do that, you are my go-to, as I said before, my go-to guy for minor nations. Why is it that you prefer those minor nations? What is it that draws you to them?
It's very easy basically, because every game I play, I love playing the underdog.
Wow.
I love having something that nobody else has.
Mm.
I love bringing something to the table that people say, "Wow, what are you bringing?"
Yeah.
Instead of your typical Waffen SS army or your British Airborne,
Yeah.
which I hate. Uh,
They're everywhere.
they're
Yeah.
everywhere, and
Yeah.
for instance, the tournament I attended
Mm.
last week, where we used Tourney Keeper, the
Yeah.
Greeks that I used, they weren't even made
They
in
weren't even
Tourney
mentioned.
Keeper.
You
So,
you couldn't type in that I was
yeah,
bringing a Greek army.
yeah,
No, it was impossible. Yeah.
I was playing custom army.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's I think it's more fun, and
Play the underdog. That is,
play the
yeah.
underdog. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hate being sort of a trophy hunter, or
Yeah.
the one that says, "Oh, you bring this and you'll win." No, I want to find my own way of winning. It
Yeah.
hasn't happened so far, but but still, that is my goal,
Yeah.
to have a minor nation, and to be competitive within the restrictions that I also place on myself.
Yeah.
And it's not to, I don't want it to sound like an excuse, because there are many better players than
Mm.
I. Um, but still, I like to have theme, and I like to have historical
Yeah.
accuracy in the list that I made.
Mm.
Um, so a
So
minor
there is
nation,
a lot of things that restrict you
yeah,
from maybe winning competitive events, at least.
yeah,
But I do enjoy the idea that you have, that you want to feel love for the thing that you're bringing, and
yeah,
at the same time you want it to work. So making that work within those limitations
yeah,
is really, and I think that that is the way to approach playing, not the four big nations. If you want to play something else, then you really need to love that other
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Um,
definitely,
because that love is what's going to drive you through the defeats that you're going to find initially when you're not bringing the top level of competitive
yeah.
lists. Yeah.
Most of these nations either have no particular good rules,
Yeah.
national rules.
Yeah.
Some of them even have negative rules.
Yeah.
And
Italy.
Italy, I've played Italy
Yeah.
more than any other nation,
Yeah.
and I still I've sold all my Italians
Yeah.
for the second time, but I
Yeah.
know I'll buy a third Italian army at some point.
Yeah, I know you
Uh,
will.
yeah,
I've seen what you're looking at, and
yeah.
it looks good.
And they
Yeah.
have shit rules. They
Yeah.
are
They
really,
do.
really bad.
Yeah.
But there's just something that I like about Italy. Maybe it's the feathers on the Bersaglieri's hats, or it's
Oh, they look awesome.
yeah, the small tankettes. There are so many uh, different things that I really like about them,
Yeah.
and none of them has anything to do with game mechanics or
Yep.
whether they're competitive.
Yep.
But there are nations that I believe can be very competitive as well.
Yes, and we're going to go through some of the different minor nations and
Yeah.
what their like pros and cons are in a minute. But that was really great. Thank you. So let's talk the pros and cons of the minor nations then.
Yeah.
So and maybe go through some of the different nations that there are. So let's start from the top. Norway and Denmark. How do they sit for you?
I've played against the Danish army.
Yes,
Played
me as
against,
well. Me as well. Yeah.
yeah. I played against Jan,
Yeah.
and I won with my Italians.
Yeah.
But
They are very, very limited in their
they are
full select.
extremely limited. They have one choice of a vehicle.
Yeah.
They have, I think, one choice in artillery.
Yeah.
And then they have, I think,
And they have a negative national special rule. So
yeah.
are we discounting the Danes as ever being anything close to competitive here?
Yes.
Yeah.
You have no choices here, and
Yeah.
it's the same with Norway.
Yeah.
And I know that there are Norwegian figures coming from Great Escape games,
Yeah.
and I would not rule out me buying them. But again,
But they're not
both,
very good
no,
as in the
no,
game. They're not very good. No.
no, they're not.
They need some kind of expanded roster, or at least some kind of special rules that would
Yeah,
make them usable in any sort of way.
yeah.
So what about Belgium, for instance? Belgium is also like a minor nation,
It is.
and they do have a very limited roster, but they also have one interesting special rule. They
Do
can
they get
take
a
that.
free artillery
They
piece?
get the free artillery
Yeah.
piece.
So like, and at the risk of insulting the French or the Belgians, they're sort of like a minor French nation.
It is a minor
Yeah.
French. It is
So
sort of they're completely copying what the French could bring,
yeah,
and even their troops seem Frenchified somehow.
yeah.
What do you think about them? Worth it? Not worth it?
Again, if you want to play Belgium, it's because you have found something
Yeah,
within the Belgian army that you think is really cool, or you like the models,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
If you want to play them for their rules, go for France because you'll
Yeah.
have a lot more
But
choices.
much, much better choices.
Yeah,
I also think that you end up with what I would call a mono build, where you only have one way of playing them, because if
yeah,
you have that extra artillery piece, then what you're going to try and do competitively, at least for me, is you're going to try and make a gunline army
yeah,
which has more artillery than the enemy.
yeah,
So you're very predictable in what you can actually bring to
yeah,
an event. And I just think that if you're going for a mono build, there are better armies. We're going to look at those in a second.
yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
Well,
So
close to those are my current army,
yeah.
the Greeks.
Yes.
The Greeks don't have a lot of choice
No.
either. What they do have is I quite like their infantry. They
Hmm?
have three infantry choices.
Which is very
Cavalry,
limited. Yeah.
very limited. They have cavalry.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which is good.
yeah, it's okay. I
Yeah.
can't remember whether they actually can assault. I can't remember. Then they have inexperienced
Yeah.
infantry, and then they have regular infantry.
Yes.
But what makes them, I actually think, very good is that you can take this VB launcher,
Yeah.
like you can with the French and quite
Yes.
possibly the Belgians as well,
Yeah.
and put that in your squad,
So
which makes
for people
you,
who don't know, the BB launcher is basically a light mortar.
yeah,
It's a grenade launcher that you mount on a rifle.
yeah,
So that it's a rifle mortar.
yeah.
Um,
It only has a range of 18, but still you can make split fire.
yeah.
And again, if you have an enemy unit that is sort of hunkered down on an objective, you'll slowly start to
just plinking away and
yeah,
make them move.
exactly. And then for 1 point, you can make them tough fighters if you make
Bing.
you make the choice to take regulars.
Yes.
That means you can have 7 regulars with a VB launcher and being tough fighter for 97 points.
Which means that most assault armies will stay away from you.
Yeah.
And if you're facing something that's weaker than yourself, you can basically assault it away.
Yeah.
So that infantry is actually kind of good,
Yeah.
being regular. I would prefer to be veteran if I was running it
Yeah.
as assault troops, but that is actually kind of good.
Yeah.
And the VB launcher is competitively, in my eyes at least, way better than running them with an LMG, which I
like
know
the
that
LMGs.
you like the LMGs, but that is discussion for another day, right?
Yeah.
But the VB launcher does definitely have its place
Yeah.
in my eyes, yes. And it's
It-
still 20 points, right?
It's still 20 points, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, you are the most limiting thing in the Greek army is the anti-tank capabilities.
Yes.
The best you have is your artillery.
Yeah.
Or you can take the Renault FT-17, which is basically a World War I tank,
Yeah.
which has a low velocity light anti-tank gun, so +3.
So not good at all.
Not good at all. But again, you get it for 65 points.
Yeah. So very, very
And
cheap.
it's, armor
But
7 and fully enclosed, but it's pitifully slow. So you,
yeah.
you move very slowly with it.
But I've seen people do well with those as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the Spanish team brought a French list to the WTC, which had those
Yeah.
World War One tanks in it. So you can do stuff with these tanks because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
If you have other stuff in your army.
Exactly.
There's also like other benefits to running the Greeks because I know you run them using British equipment.
Yeah.
The universal carriers.
Yeah, the Greek army were I don't know whether they were given or whether they bought them from the British, but they use the universal carrier.
Yeah.
And again, unlike what I've seen used, I put an anti-tank rifle in it so that I get a bit more anti-tank options.
Yeah.
And they work very well,
Yeah.
especially if you put a regular 5-man team with a tough fighter, and I put an LMG in it. And
Yeah, which
I
makes
put
no
the
sense.
I
Yeah,
put the LMG in it because it's my only option of adding shots to
yeah.
a 5-man unit.
And you want
But
those extra shots because you don't have the SMGs.
yeah, so
Yeah,
I get 7 shots,
yeah,
5-man, tough fighter,
yeah,
and you have the Bren next to you. So it can work.
yeah. And it sort of works the way you do it because you're using them for one massive outflank,
Yeah,
right? So what you're doing here is you're taking a minor nation that has a very limited choice, but you're actually finding the choices that work, and you're finding maybe you're not spending every point the way I think you should spend every
mm,
point, but you are spending every point deliberately. You're thinking
yeah,
about how to spend those points, and you're making a plan that can work with what you're getting here,
yeah,
which is what I think you need to do when if you want to run a minor nation in any
yeah.
way that makes sense, right?
And that is part of the attraction
Yeah,
of minor nations. It's you sort of have your limited roster. This is
yeah,
what you can take.
yeah,
What would you do to make it work?
yeah,
Which is why I've been saying to a lot of competitive players, oh, but why do you take one of the 5 big ones?
yeah.
Try and take this pool
Minor
of
nation, yeah,
units
yeah,
and try to make the best you can with this.
yeah,
Show that you are just
yeah,
superior player.
yeah.
Uh,
Which
it's
is
all
actually
on
why
Devious.
I am still building and painting my Czechoslovakian army because
Yeah,
of what you said here, because I want to run a minor nation, and I am, like you said, limiting myself to what the Czechoslovakian army actually had.
yeah,
I'm buying them as Romanians, by the way, but I'm limiting myself to exactly what there was available to the Czechoslovakians in 1938, early
yeah.
war. No Panzerfausts, nothing of anything that was interesting. But yeah, and it's an interesting exercise. I'm looking forward to trying them out. Now
Yeah.
I just need to do my bases, but then I'm done.
Yeah.
Right. So let's run through the Eastern European ones. Poland.
Yeah.
For you, are they still a minor nation, even though they're so competitive? I mean, we saw 3 Polish armies to the WTC.
Yeah. They're competitive because of their cavalry. I
Yes,
would
the
never
only
use
thing that's really
cavalry.
really works. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been looking at the 10th Motorized Regiment or Division. Again, the miniatures,
Yeah.
they have these huge black trench coats, leather
Yeah.
trench coats.
Yeah.
And you can get some quite cool miniatures as well.
Yeah.
But so far, the way I want to run them is not possible
No.
within Bolt Action because they
No.
had this sort of car,
Yeah.
semi truck that they rode around in.
Mm.
But you can only have, I think, 3 or 4
Okay.
in it, and you can at a minimum have 5 in each unit. So
So
you
they
cannot
can't
put them
actually
in a unit.
they can't actually be in the damn car.
Yeah.
No.
No,
No.
so I don't really know that much about Poland, but yeah, the
No.
cavalry that
Yeah,
makes them
that
competitive.
and they are Poland right now is a monobuild. You're
Yeah,
buying the Lancers. You may put other stuff in it, but they are definitely a monobuild. There's one way to run Polish, and that's basically the only way you can build an army for
yeah,
Poles right now.
yeah,
What about the Romanians, Bulgarians then? If we're running through the rest of Eastern Europe,
yeah. You can put Hungary in there as well.
Hungary as well, yeah,
These 3 nations have a similar rule,
yeah,
a national rule,
yeah,
access support,
yeah.
which when I first looked at it, I thought, wow, I can take a second tank.
You
Very
can,
cool.
yeah.
And that is what a lot of people are using it for.
Mm.
But then I pitched an idea to one of our common friends,
Yeah,
Michael. I
yeah.
said, you can actually run the ultimate gun line using
Yes, you can.
Romanians
Yeah.
because the Romanians get a free artillery piece as well.
And they can
That's,
have one as well, and then they can buy the mortar, and then
yeah,
they can take an Axis one as well. That is
yeah.
4
That
pieces
is
of
4
artillery.
in one platoon.
Yeah.
And if you play at a tournament where you can have 2 platoons, you can
That's eight
put it up.
eight guns.
No, you'll end up
Seven
with
guns.
7, yeah.
Yeah,
But still, it's really crazy.
that's
Um,
insane.
and again, maybe not as much as the French and the Belgians, but you getting that with extra artillery piece for
Yeah.
free, which is normally a medium howitzer that you'll take or a medium
And and
anti-tank gun.
and especially because you're combining it with the free Axis choice,
Yeah,
which doesn't have to be a tank, it doesn't have to be infantry, it can
uh,
be anything you want. So you can
anything
sort
you
of
want.
tailor it around what you want
Yeah,
to add to your list.
yeah. So the Romanians they can really have a
Yeah.
lot of artillery,
Yeah.
and they've actually got some very good infantry choices as well.
They have.
Um, and most of them they are actually not in the Italian Axis book, but they are
Yeah.
in the campaign book Fortress Budapest,
Yeah.
and there are some in the Stalingrad book as well.
Yeah.
But they have infantry that can just run through rough ground like it's normal.
Yeah.
They can have very good engineer teams as well. So they have the tools
Yes.
definitely, because if you want to have sort of a cheaper tank
Mm.
that can do something, they have the T-38 that they
Yeah.
can or Panzer 38.
Yeah.
You can get the really big guns as well, the big cats from the
You
Germans.
can, although I don't
Uh,
think you should, but you can.
Now
And
you had the option to do so, yeah.
yes, yes. And the
So
T38 is actually it's like it's okay priced.
yeah,
It has a light AT gun. It has double machine guns. It has A+ armor. It's
yeah,
perfectly fine tank.
it's okay. I think
Especially
it's
for early war.
yeah, it's very good for early war.
Yeah.
So you can, even if you opt not to take the gun line in a single platoon, you will still have 2 artillery pieces,
Well,
and you'll quite possibly still have 2 tanks and
yeah.
your armored car
Yeah.
and very good infantry.
So you can, I see two possible builds here. You go like heavy on the tank choices or heavy on the artillery choices. Both of them are very possible.
Yeah.
And that's the same more or less for the Bulgarians, right?
Yeah,
Because they also have that possibility of running a German either howitzer or a tank. Yeah.
yeah, or even if you want to put a Waffen SS squad in
Yeah.
there, you can actually do that.
Yeah.
They don't have the free artillery piece, but they have the insane partisan fighting or warfare
Yeah.
rule,
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
cannot
No outflanking.
outflank,
Yeah.
no
So that
what's it
that
called?
actually
Forward deployment.
forces you to run straight into their gunline army. So
Yeah,
that national special rule reinforces one style of play for Bulgarians, which is sitting back, aiming everything at the enemy, and going
yeah,
on ambush.
yeah.
Which can be okay, I guess.
It can be okay. And they again, they have I think 3 different infantry choices.
Yeah.
And again, that is not why you play the Bulgarians. You play
No.
the Bulgarians because they have this insane rule,
Mm.
which forces your opponent to play narrowly down, because
Yeah.
you can outflank, but he
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So I think they're very competitive.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot of board control there.
Yeah.
So they are very good as well.
Okay.
Hungary is sort of, I would actually say, the weakest of the 3. They
Of
don't
the
have,
3 Eastern European, I
yeah,
agree. Their national special rule is not very helpful.
no,
Um,
fanatic
and
headquarter.
yeah, why?
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
sure.
really stupid.
Yeah.
Um, you cannot really use it unless you really, really want to do something of it,
Yeah.
where you go veteran second lieutenant with 2 veteran
And
guys,
even
and
then, it will be very situational. How often do
yeah,
you charge them, and how often is it that they survive in a
yeah,
combat? Not worth it. Not worth it.
no. What they do have though is they can have the access support,
They
which
can.
is very good. We've
Yeah.
gone through that, but they have a lot of infantry choices, and
Yes,
most of
the
them,
infantry roster is way better than the other
yeah,
twos. But yeah, for me, they're just not competitive enough because of those national special rules that
yeah.
don't really play
You
into
you
it.
you don't get anything for free,
Yeah,
and you don't get anything that forces your opponent to play in a different style,
exactly.
unlike the other 2. But
Yeah,
you have a lot of different um, infantry choices. I
yeah,
can't remember which one, but you can actually get inexperienced fanatics,
can.
which is, I've not seen that in any other nation
Uh,
than this, except the Japanese, of course. But
Japanese, of course, but yeah. So you
it,
can run inexperienced fanatics there. Yes,
yeah.
that's
At some point, I made a list where it was apparently uh, the river that runs through Budapest
mm,
and splits the city in the Buda part and the Pest
yeah,
part.
yeah,
They were these sailors
mm,
which had actually taken all the old machine guns of their different ships, and they were prepared to defend the city.
yeah,
And it's again a completely different weapon. You get this for 5 points. You get this 3-shot LMG,
yeah,
uh, but you cannot move and shoot. And again, it was a fun thing,
yeah,
and I found wonderful figures from Empress
yeah,
that can be used. But
yeah.
wow, it was like £200 just for the infantry.
Oh, oh,
So
and that again is maybe one of the detriments of playing minor nations is that
yeah,
you're going to have to go searching for figures, and
yeah,
those miniatures quite often they're smaller companies and they are not plastics, so you're going to have to buy expensive.
yeah.
You're going to have to buy metal. Some of us do prefer metal, but it all adds up to what it
Yeah.
costs to play minor nations, right?
I would say though, and I'm not endorsed by them or anything, but I've had both. I've had two Romanian armies, and I've had one Hungarian army, and I've used figures from Great Escape games, and the customer service
very,
is
very good.
yeah. They're very good. They have this army builder where you can actually get an army for reasonable money. Everything is metal figures, and there are a lot of choices. You get all the choices that you can take. And they have second to none customer service. And if Stuart, the guy who has it, if you write to him, he is more than willing to tweak a few things here and there. If you say, oh, could I get a second LMG in that squad instead, he will happily do so if it's possible for him. So I cannot recommend them enough. If you want to go minor nation access, go for Great Escape games. You will get a good deal, and you will get good
the
figures.
sculpts are also quite good.
Yeah, they have different sculptors, and there's one that I prefer from the other, but that's it. But they're very easy to paint, and it's very good. So yeah.
Right. What about the Asian nations, the Chinese ones, and Australia? Because we're also going to have to add Australia to our minor nation lists. What do you think about those?
I think Australia has the possibility to be very competitive, actually.
And you know what? An Australian army just won the German nationals.
Yeah, I saw that.
So yeah, that can happen. Yeah. So the Australians are quite good, but they are leaning towards the Commonwealth nations. They're looking like their roster is more like what you would see in the British Army, anyway. So, and they do have some nice special rules, national rules. Yeah.
It's like when I played the Romanians, I thought I was playing sort of semi-German. Because my tanks were German, my artillery was German, my infantry was Romanian, and I think it's the same with the Australians.
It is.
You will basically be playing a Commonwealth nation, which got the equipment from the British.
And you could just as easily build an Australian army using the British rules for like taking that special rule and making them common, whatever. You could build the same exactly. So what about the Chinese ones? They were really, really competitive, and then they got nerfed. And right now, I'm not sure why and how you would run a Chinese army. Have you considered those?
I have, but for reasons that you don't understand. Now, I've looked at Chinese Warlord, which is a bit crazy because unlike any other nation or any other army, you're sort of given a veteran second lieutenant or officer, which has at least 2 followers, and you can add 2 more. And before you've actually spent any points on infantry, you've spent close to 150 points on your officer, which is a bit mad. But they can be on horses, and you can have this bodyguard that can take a bullet for your officer. You'll have a flag bearer, and it's
all kinds of wacky stuff.
Yeah, and you have access to different kinds of okay infantry as well. But I think if you want to play them competitively, you should play the other 2 options. Because there are some infantry which are very, very good, and I believe both of them get a free inexperienced full squad like the Russians.
They do.
And they have some okay choices in the infantry. Again, they are limited in what they can take tank wise.
Especially, yeah, and I think that they also become very mono built.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm looking at them competitively, they are sort of build a horde of light infantry, maybe even an inexperienced infantry that is very good at close combat, and just push them forward.
Yeah.
That's the way you build, and they were even better when you could run them with the sparrow tactics for the communists, right? But then that sort of went away. But I mean, the Spanish still brought a Chinese army to the WTC and did okay with it. Just running off that inertia of just pushing a lot of infantry towards the enemy, and then hoping some of them survive the shots. Yeah.
And I quite like the small guerrilla infantry squads that can do a lot of stuff and have rules that really enhance their usability.
Yeah.
But China is far down my list of minor nations that I want to try, I must say.
Yes. Although I did see that somebody had made these new miniatures for the Vietnam War. Did you notice those? There were plastics and the Viet Cong ones. Yes, they were running around with AK-47s, but I was like immediately thinking, ooh, I could convert those to having World War II era weapons. They would be brilliant for Chinese. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to buy 28 boxes of those. No, that doesn't work. Anyways.
No,
So
I have 2 full armies for the Vietnam War, and I've seen on YouTube, if you Google sort of like bold action Viet Cong, Viet Minh or something like that, there's actually a guy there who has taken metal figures and he's taken them, I think, from the assault group, which does a huge
Vietnam War
range as well. And he runs them as partisans. And this special SOE liaison officer infantry group is actually American advisors, and he runs them as 1945 Vietnamese who fought against the Japanese.
Oh, that is so cool.
It is immensely cool, and they have a captured Chi-Ha tank, and you go on YouTube and you can see
I think
his
I will
army.
do that because I mean I've been to Vietnam and I teach history, right? And I've taught Vietnamese history, and the fact that the Vietnamese actually liberated themselves from the Japanese was one of the reasons for the Vietnam War ultimately, because then the French tried to come back, and the Vietnamese were having none of that, and then the Americans took over that war. So it all built from that one moment where they actually freed themselves. That is so cool.
And it's a great looking army, really good looking army. I think there's even a small battle report where he plays some Japanese against us. So it's very cool.
But again, it becomes a mono build, right? Today I did a video on building partisans, and it does become very mono built. It's just difficult to do anything with them that's not large units of infantry pushing towards the close combat. So for you, the best competitive minor nations, what would they be?
I would say they would be Italy and they would be France.
Okay.
Those are the big two, and then Bulgaria and Romania. And I've not talked about the Finns. The Finns are.
Let's push the Finns to one side. Because they're a special case anyway.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, even we should maybe even push Italy to one side as well, because they are again a special case. They are one of the major Axis powers, and have both late and early war builds. So if we're just running with it, they have to be early war. The Finns and the Italians are out. So I get the French because they are one of the big 4 or 5, I guess, and they were an important power and became an important power again afterwards. And then the Bulgarians, you said, and the Romanians.
definitely.
Is that the gun line thing that haunts you?
It's the option. Again, I hate playing against people who have Panzerfausts in their army, because it's the one tool that can make your infantry heavy army work.
Yeah.
Because if you have an army standing there behind something out of line of sight, and they have a Panzerfaust, nobody is going to drive through it,
Mm.
or just past it, because that +6 will kill everything. And both the Bulgarians and the Romanians have access to that. They have access to different builds, but again, you can have this back line with 4 to 5 howitzers,
and have the possibility of having the tanks to push with as well.
Yeah, you can have that as well, and you can even add heavy mortars if you want to go really crazy, and you will shred most things that are in line of sight of either you or your artillery piece or the spotter. I would say Romania is a bit more competitive than the Bulgarians because they have some excellent infantry choices. I quite like the infantry that I can't remember what they are, mountaineer squads or something like that. They that treat rough ground as normal. You can run through
those
everything.
Are really cool.
I have that with my Greeks in the first round. That all infantry
that
can.
Always surprises an opponent.
It does.
Always does.
And I think it's really, really good. And imagine doing that for the entire game. It would be so good.
Yeah.
You will be so good in every objective mission because you can stand on the other side of a room
behind a
and
forest
run
and
through it.
Yeah.
It's
that would be cool. Yeah.
So based on the choices that they have, and actually for both of them, their national rules as well. Getting a free
That's really
artillery
interesting because
piece.
you're not really including the Polish, which were the go-to minor nation for most competitive players here at the last WTC, right? So you're actually focusing more on these Bulgarians, Romanians because you have more choice. That's really interesting. I like that.
I think you have, and the Bulgarians, in my opinion, it's not a free unit of any kind, but it's the best national rule there is.
Yeah,
It's the
for minor
ultimate
nations.
board control.
It is.
You cannot outflank and you cannot forward deploy.
Imagine coupling that with a unit of Brandenburgers from the German ally.
Yeah.
You would completely dominate the opponent, forcing him to stay on the board and he can't do anything because he can't come on from reserves, he can't outflank, he can't forward deploy, nothing. He'll just have to walk towards your guns.
And even though it might not be historically correct from a competitive point of view,
really good.
There is nothing that limits you from taking a Brandenburger squad as your Axis support.
No.
And that would be crazy. You would actually just stand on your own line and then having to move forward there. And if you then take a gun line, getting just to the center of the table or the halfway line is going to be a real struggle.
It is.
So I would say those two. Again, I have not played Poles, and I've not had them as an opponent.
No, I have many times. They're really good, but they are very mono build. Whereas the Romanians and Bulgarians, for me, they're you can do more stuff with them. As maybe the only two minor nations. So I quite agree that I find that these may be the way to go competitively. Although the Polish, of course, with their lancers, are a very strong assault army. You do get cut up quite a bit, especially if you're on competitive boards that may be more open. Then, I mean, the Danish boards are quite often cluttered compared to what we see maybe in some international tournaments. And the Polish, they really suffer if you have very open boards. They also suffer if you have very closed boards because then they can't move and assault that easily. But they being shut up is really not good for a Polish Lancer army.
Yeah, and that again, you mentioned something that I think will make both Bulgaria and Romania more competitive is
Yeah,
if you want to play in competitive tournaments
yeah,
around Europe or
yeah,
somewhere else, and if we sort of exclude the Danish tables,
yeah.
uh, I've never been to one of these tournaments, but I've seen the
The
pictures of
photos.
the
Yeah.
tables, and I am horrified at the
Let's just say the
the
WTC tables are more bare than we see in many other
yeah.
tournaments. Although, I mean, if we compare just Danish tournaments to maybe what we see in the UK, um, we do have a lot more terrain on our tables than we see
We
abroad.
do.
Yeah.
We do, which I actually prefer, and
Yes.
I go overboard. Uh,
Yeah.
but if you have tables where there is not that much terrain and
Mm.
there's long lanes of line of sight,
Yeah.
having gun
You're
lines,
you're favoring guns then. You're definitely
I
favoring.
am definitely
Yeah. And
because
the hated Darker Steward because the machine guns also become better when you have a lot of line of sight.
yeah,
Um, so yeah. Right, we are closing in on the end here, but we have like two things that we need to talk about at the end. So how to be competitive with a minor nation and why you should own at least one minor nation. So let's go to the first one, and I want us to answer this each one of us separately
mm,
because we have very different perspective, right? You started out with the love of the army. I started out with competitiveness. So in your eyes, how would you build an army, a minor nation army, if you wanted to be competitive, if you wanted to win a tournament with that? What would you do? How would you be competitive with that?
I would choose Romania,
Yeah,
and I would choose it because I have the I just taking two platoons and not doing anything other than using points for two artillery pieces. I would still have a gun line. I would have three artillery pieces.
mm,
That is one thing.
yeah,
Combine that with two inexperienced medium mortars, and you have five indirect sources
yeah,
in your army. You can still have good infantry that can sort of stand back
yeah,
and run through everything
yeah.
if you
Or
want to.
or a counter punch when the enemy
Yeah,
moves up. Yeah,
exactly. You have the option to have some okay tanks
mm,
for that can do the job. They're not stewards, but the Panzer 38 or Panzer 35, they're
yeah,
sort of they are okay for what they do.
yeah,
Uh, and they're actually not vulnerable, if I
yeah.
remember correctly.
They are not.
Um, so for 130, 35 points, you get 10
Yeah, I
point.
think it's
You get
130. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. If you take your Axis support as a German,
mm,
that tank has 12 shots.
yeah,
Uh, so I think you can build something very competitive.
mm.
You will not be the one with the upper hand in the dice count.
Yeah.
Definitely not. You
That
you
will be difficult to do that at least. Yeah.
it will, yeah. But
So you're aiming for 13 to 14 dice, hopefully, but
yeah, I
uh,
would be lucky if I get 14. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, that would include inexperienced officers. If we go to a dual platoon, I
yeah,
would put the anti-tank rifle there just for the dice, and because I actually think it's okay for transports
mm,
to sort of close them down. But that is the one thing that is uh, difficult to get the upper hand in.
yeah,
Even though you get one free die,
yeah.
um, because if you
And
want
you would also go for these because of the opportunity for the Panzerfaust or what?
yeah, but the Panzerfaust is again, it will sort of make your opponent think twice about just ramming his steward close
Yeah,
to this infantry unit. Um, so, and again, it's only 5 points,
yeah,
5 points for a Panzerfaust,
it's really
and
good. Yeah,
and some of the infantry choices has the option to put multiple SMGs in it, or even some of them assault rifles, I think. And again, you have more options. So that is what I would do.
Cool. Now, for me as well, I would accept one thing that you've sort of been talking about here. I would accept that you have to have a mono build. You have to have one specific, because all of these nations are really limited. And I would look through the nations and just figure out which one of them would suit my playstyle. Because when you're in a minor nation, you have one playstyle. It's not going to be 2 or 3, and you have options of going different routes or maybe doing something mechanized, or you're locked into one style of play most of the time. And I think you need to accept that style of play and find that style of play interesting, because if you don't, you're gonna suck. I mean, you're just going to get bored and do something that's wrong. Basically, you're going to lose the game because maybe you attack too soon, or maybe you don't sit back enough, or whatever. Right? Then you're going to lose the game. So I think you need to figure out if this playstyle fits you. So I definitely think you shouldn't start out with a minor nation. This is
no,
for professional. It's leave it to the pros to play in the minor nations, and I think you should have something that you love. Like, so that it needs to be a labor of love. You need to put effort into it, and I also think you need to play it for quite a while, because that playing competitively with a minor nation, you are limited, and you need to be a good player to make up for those limitations. But you can. I just think you need to practice a little bit more.
The learning curve is a lot steeper, definitely.
Yeah. Right. So again, each of us in turn, and I'll give the word to you last. The final question. That is maybe like an encouragement for our viewers here to why they should go out and buy a minor nation. For me, the idea that you should own one minor nation is twofold, and one of them is a thing that I learned from you, Kaspar, is that you should have an army that is not competitive. You should have an army that is something where you don't care about whether you win or lose that much, something that's just for fun, that you can bring, and people will not say, wow, that is overpowered. You're bringing your Darker Stewards. Yeah, but I only own Darker Stewards. Why would I buy anything else? You should buy something that's just not very good necessarily. So that's one thing, just to take it to so that you can attend casual events, you can attend thematic events, and not be pointed fingers at for being a competitive cheesemonger. So that's one thing. And then you should have a Kaspar that can help you build the list. Because I can't figure it out. I'm just no good at it. And then the final thing I would say is you should buy one minor nation, because it will make you a better player. You will become way better if you try out different play styles, and if you limit yourself, you will become a better player for when you go to that competitive event. So that was my competitive stick for all my competitive listeners. What would you say? Why should people go out, buy themselves a minor nation?
First of all, I'm still looking for that point where I've played a minor nation enough so that I am actually good with it. But I get your point. I get it very much.
Yeah.
You should buy a minor nation because it's very, very cool. And you cannot underestimate the fact that when you bring an army that nobody has seen or played before, and they go, wow, what are you bringing that is really cool. It's actually very good.
You'll get a lot of brownie points that way.
Definitely. And I love those. I've never won a tournament, but I've always been complimented on my armies and what I bring. And I quite agree that having sort of a limited pool of choices, these are the perhaps 3 infantry units that you can have. You have 2 anti-tank options, and you don't really have that many transport options or things like that. Find out what makes this minor nation work.
Yeah.
Of course, you can run into scenarios where you cannot use it. In the tournament I was in, one of the and I play the outflank heavy hammer with the Greeks.
Yeah.
One I sat over one game because of TOs and different uneven amount of participants.
Yeah.
But in the second game, I played against a German who actually took Brandenburgers. And that was my tactics out the window.
Oh, no.
So what was I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I'm not going to try and have 2 roles for every single unit that needs to go. So, as you said, you really need to accept that the learning curve is very steep, and there's one play style, and you will meet opponents and their armies and have scenarios where you don't really have that much of a chance of winning.
Yeah.
But that's it. But you should definitely get it, because it's cool to learn about a nation. Somebody like Greece. For me, it was something like the Guns of Navarone. That was Greece in World War II for me. Until I started reading and watching documentaries about it, and there's so much to learn. And if you like history as well, it's cool to try and find why was it that this, for me, the Greeks, why was it that they actually held off this mighty Italian army?
Yeah, because they actually beat back the Italians to begin with. The Italians had to call in the Germans to defeat them. Yeah. Yeah.
So for competitiveness, no, don't go with the minor nation unless you want to do what you said. I want to hone my skills. I want to really find out how good a player I can be with this limited pool. But the rule of cool and the niche army that you bring, and people saying, wow, that's cool army, and where you have to sort of stand and explain what is this obscure unit that you bring. It's
this piece of equipment, I've never heard about that before.
Yeah,
why are you not just bringing assault rifles?
Yeah, it's I find it a lot more fun to bring an army that nobody else has in a tournament, instead of bringing an army that you can see there are 5 or 6 very similar armies, if not replicants of
they
at a
often
tournament.
become copies. They do.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
And it's anti-meta, which is always good.
It's always good, especially if it works for me.
Yeah.
But it's always anti-meta to bring a minor nation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kaspar, for giving your perspective and the thematic sort of voice into this channel of competitive silliness.
Yeah.
It has been great talking to you, and that was it.
That
was our stick about minor nations. And